Welcome back to the Roberta Show. I'm your host, Roberta Tabb, the Affirmation Architect, and today we're having a conversation that might be a little uncomfortable, but I think it's necessary. We're talking about taking accountability for your own life. And before we go any further, I want to make something clear. Accountability is not about blaming yourself for everything that has happened to you. There are things you did not choose. There are situations you could not control. There are people who may have disappointed you, hurt you, underestimated you, or failed to show up for you. That's real. But there's also another truth. You are still responsible for what you do next. And that is where your power lives. At some point, you have to ask, what am I doing about it? I think one of the hardest things about personal growth is realizing that awareness alone isn't enough. You can know your patterns. You can know your triggers. You can know why you procrastinate. You can know why you struggle with boundaries. You can know why you keep choosing the same types of relationships, and you can understand every single reason you became who you are, and still remain exactly where you are. Because eventually, awareness has to become action. At some point, you have to ask yourself, okay, I know why I'm here. What am I going to do about it? That's accountability. It's not punishment. It's not shame. It's ownership. Stop giving your power away. Here's something I've learned. Every time you make someone else completely responsible for the direction of your life, you give them power they were never supposed to have. You say, I would be happier if they would change. I would finally start if someone gave me an opportunity. I would feel confident if people supported me. I would move forward if my circumstances were different. And maybe some of those things would make life easier. But how long are you willing to wait? That's the question. How long are you willing to put your life on hold, waiting for someone else to become different? At some point, you have to decide, I'm going to work with what I have from where I am and start moving. That doesn't mean the circumstances are fair. It means you're refusing to let them have the final word. Your patterns are your responsibility now. This is where accountability can get uncomfortable, because once you recognize a pattern, you have a responsibility to decide what you're going to do with it. Maybe you learned people-pleasing because it once kept you safe. Maybe you learned to stay quiet because speaking up created conflict. Maybe you became hyper-independent because people disappointed you. Maybe you procrastinate because you're afraid of failing. There can be very valid reasons behind our patterns. Understanding those reasons matters. But understanding a pattern doesn't mean you have to keep living inside of it. You can say, I understand why I became this way, and I'm still choosing something different now. Both things can be true. That's growth. Look at what you keep tolerating. Sometimes accountability means looking at what you continue to allow. That's a hard one, because we spend a lot of time talking about what people do to us. But sometimes we need to ask, why do I keep participating? Why do I keep going back? Why do I keep saying yes when I mean no? Why do I keep accepting less than what I know I deserve? Why do I keep having the same conversation without changing my behavior? And why do I keep giving access to people who consistently disturb my peace? Again, this isn't about blame. It's about recognizing where you still have a choice. Because once you see where your choices are, you start seeing where your power is. Be honest about the role you play. I think self-empowerment requires a level of honesty that isn't always comfortable. You have to be willing to look at yourself without immediately defending yourself. Sometimes you're the one procrastinating. Sometimes you're the one avoiding the conversation. Sometimes you're the one breaking your own boundaries, and sometimes you're the one asking for change while continuing to make the exact same choices. And you have to be able to say, that's me. I'm doing that. Not, I'm terrible. Not, I'll never change. Just, I see it, and now I can choose differently. That's such a powerful place to be, because you can't change something you're unwilling to acknowledge. Stop breaking promises to yourself. Let's talk about another form of accountability that I think we overlook: keeping your word to yourself. How many times have you said, "I'm starting Monday. I'm going to set that boundary. I'm going to finish that project. I'm going to start taking care of myself. I'm going to stop going back." And then you don't. Now, one missed promise doesn't mean anything. We're human. But when breaking promises to yourself becomes a pattern, something happens. You stop believing yourself. Your self-trust starts disappearing. So when you say, "This time I'm going to do it," a little voice inside of you says, "Are you?" That's why accountability and self-trust are so connected. Every time you follow through, you create evidence. You prove to yourself, when I say something matters, I show up for it. That's real confidence, not just saying you believe in yourself, giving yourself a reason to. Your future needs your participation. I want you to really hear this. You cannot manifest, affirm, visualize, journal, or dream your way around participation. And I believe deeply in affirmation work. But affirmations are not magic words. They help us reshape how we speak to ourselves so we can begin showing up differently. The affirmation has to eventually become an action. I choose myself means something when you actually choose yourself. I deserve better means something when you stop accepting less. I trust myself means something when you finally make the decision. I am becoming disciplined means something when you show up on the day you don't feel like it. Your future requires your participation. And sometimes the most empowering thing you can say is, "If I want something different, I have to do something different." You can choose again. That's the beautiful part about accountability. You can choose again. You don't have to be held hostage by the choices you made 5 years ago, or last year, or last month, or yesterday. You can wake up and say, "That version of me made that decision. The person I am today is choosing differently." That's not inconsistency. That's growth. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to set a new standard. You are allowed to stop participating in things that no longer align with who you're becoming. Taking accountability means realizing that while you cannot rewrite yesterday, you have tremendous influence over what you choose today. And that's enough to start changing your life. Accountability is self-empowerment. This is why I wanted this conversation near the end of this season. Because we've spent this entire season talking about moving from stuck to aligned, and eventually, alignment requires ownership. You have to stop waiting for somebody to rescue you. Stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for perfect circumstances. Stop waiting for everyone around you to understand. At some point, you decide, "This is my life, and I'm responsible for how I show up for it. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, but intentionally." And there is something incredibly freeing about that. Because once you take responsibility for the parts you can control, you stop feeling powerless inside of your own life. Welcome to your affirmation work. Before we close, take a deep breath. And I want you to repeat these without judgment, just intention. I take responsibility for the life I am creating. I release blame and reclaim my power. I can acknowledge my past without allowing it to control my future. I am honest with myself about the patterns I need to change. I keep the promises I make to myself. I take actions that support the life I say I want. I am responsible for my choices, my boundaries, and my growth. I forgive myself for the times I didn't know better. Now that I know better, I give myself permission to choose differently. I do not need perfect circumstances to begin. I trust myself to make better choices, one decision at a time. I participate fully in my own growth. I am not powerless. I have choices and I have agency. I have the ability to change the direction of my life. And finally, my life is mine and I choose to show up for it. Here's your alignment check-in. Before you leave today, I want you to ask yourself one question. Where am I asking life to change while refusing to change my own choices? Sit with that. And don't immediately defend yourself. Just listen. The truth is, taking accountability isn't about blaming yourself. It's about recognizing where you still have power. And your action this week. Choose one thing you've been complaining about, avoiding, or waiting to change. Then ask, what part of this is actually within my control? Maybe it's the conversation you need to have, the boundary you need to set, the application you need to submit, the habit you need to change, or the situation you need to stop returning to. Whatever it is, choose one action and take it. Thank you for spending this time with me today on The Roberta Show. As we get closer to the end of this season, I want you to remember something. Self-empowerment isn't just believing you deserve a better life, it's becoming an active participant in creating one. You cannot control everything that happens. You cannot control other people. You cannot rewrite the past. But you can decide what happens next. And sometimes that one decision changes everything. I'm Roberta Tabb, the Affirmation Architect. Until next time, be honest with yourself. Keep your word to yourself. Take responsibility for what you can control. And most importantly, show up for your own life.